We are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board work session for March 9th. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez,
Present.
Councilman Lees,
Present.
Councilwoman Overby,
Here.
Councilman Bragman,
Here.
Supervisor Van Scoyac.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This morning's work session will begin with the public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any matter. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if you can. The number to call in is on the top scroll of the video feed. We'll be discussing several topics today. First will be the police reform and reinvention preliminary plan. We have Fred Doss and Sandra Dunn, both committee members, chair and committee member, presenting. We also have Chief Mike Sarlo will be on the line as well. That'll be followed by a chapter 141 fire prevention code amendments with John Cholnicki and our fire marshal David Brown. Then we'll have liaison reports, and we do have a few resolutions to approve this morning. So Michael, let's go to the phones to start with. Are there any callers on the line?
No, there are no callers at this time. I'll let you know if any come in.
Okay, in that case, we'll move right on to our topics for discussion today. And if we do get callers, we'll try to fit you in between the discussion of the topics. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Fred Doss, who's the chair of the Police Reform and Reinvention Preliminary Committee, and we're going to discuss the preliminary plan with town board members. We also, as I said, have Sandra Dunn and Chief Mike Sarlo on the line. Good morning, Fred, and welcome.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much.
Just before we get started, I just want to say, I want to thank you, Fred, for chairing this committee, and Sandra for being involved as well, and all the committee members who've spent countless hours since October meeting with us and discussing how to move forward and put together this preliminary plan. It reflects a great deal of community involvement across very many sectors of our community and different demographics in order to continue to improve our police department, which is already, in my estimation, excellent in most every way. But without any further ado, Fred, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And thanks to everyone for the opportunity to be here with you. And thank you very much for inviting me to join the committee. It's been a very positive experience for me. So thank you all. Peter, as you mentioned, we formed the committee, I guess in November. Our first meeting was on December 7th. We have 19 members, so I'll go over who they are. We had 7 meetings from December 7th until yesterday, March 8th. I'll tell you who the committee members are. They all were very productive members. We have Walter Blumberg, who represented people with disabilities. We had Anthony Bosco, a police officer and president of the Police Benevolent Association. Mary Bromley is a licensed clinical social worker in town. Loretta Davis, the executive director of the retreat. Myself, I represent, I guess, officially the LGBTQIA+ community. Also have a business here. Sandra Dunn, the associate director of OLA of Eastern Long Island. Tom Flight, he's an EMT and business owner in Montauk. Josh Franklin, rabbi of the Jewish Center of the Hamptons. Joy Jackson Pearl, a community member. She also works at Longhouse. Leandra Lambert is a reverend of the St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Aubrey Peterson, a bilingual social worker at East Hampton High School. Gordon Ryan, defense attorney in private practice. Larry Smith, representative from the East Hampton Town Anti-Bias Task Force. Michael Tomei, a representative from the Latin community. Yvonne Tovar is a support staff, East Hampton High School, and represented for the Latin community as well. We also had Kathy Burke Gonzalez, and Peter Von Soyak on the committee. Mike Sarlo, the chief of police, sat in. He was a very important part of this, was at every meeting. And then we, about halfway through, we invited Brendan Ahern, who's the deputy trial chief of the Suffolk County District Attorney, to join us as well. Again, all very productive members, and we want to thank all of them for their efforts. The committee members all participated very actively in the process. It was a good, healthy, productive exchange of ideas. Police Chief Mike Sarlo, as I said, was an integral part of this, was very helpful. I know for me personally, I learned a great deal about the police department. I had not had a lot of interaction up to this, so it was a very positive experience for me personally. The committee included a relatively diverse group of people from the African American, the Latin, and the Caucasian community members, representation from the LGBT community, people with disabilities. I think probably in hindsight, we could have had a little bit more diversity on the committee, but I think we certainly heard from we got a wide representation from those who were on there. In terms of the survey, early on we formed a subcommittee to draft a survey, a community survey that was distributed in the town. On that committee were Kathy, Sandra Dunn, Loretta Davis, and myself. We met, I think, 3 or 4 times, got the survey in place, and then, as I said, distributed it. We're going to talk a lot more about the survey, of course. We also formed a draft plan committee to write the plan that we're going to go over today. I sat in on that, but it was really Sandra Dunn, Aubrey Peterson, Joy Pearl, and Walter Blumberg, who were the working members of that committee, with Sandra Dunn really taking the lead on it, and you'll hear from her shortly. So the survey, we distributed a 32-question anonymous online survey in Spanish and English, and we received 937 complete responses. So meaning we had 1,182 total responses, but not everyone answered every question. But we were following some of the guidelines from the state in terms of the categories, but we obviously created what we thought was important as well. So we covered police roles and services, personal experience and perception of the police, including language access and racial profiling questions, use of force, transparency and accountability, and demographics. Certainly some areas that the police department needs to address and improve, but overall the responses were generally very positive, with 71% of respondents in English and 60% of respondents in Spanish reporting that they believe that the police department has an excellent or good relationship with the community. Many community members commended the police for the services they provide and the important function they have in the town. The survey was shared through various public channels, including the town website, social media, the police department social media, committee members through their own social media and email. The survey helped to inform the committee members in the writing of the draft plan. And that's obviously one thing we're going to go through today. I could go on, but Sandra's going to talk a lot about the survey. And then, of course, we can answer any questions unless anyone has any questions right now.
Any questions for Fred at this point? Please continue. Morning, Sandra.
Hi, good morning. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you for this opportunity and, for the opportunity to serve on the committee. Like Fred, I also felt, and I think all committee members felt, that it was a very productive, interesting two-way opportunity to exchange information in different directions, right? In both directions, learning from the police and also sharing with the police, in this case, Police Chief Mike Sarlo and Anthony Bosco, PBA president, what some perspectives and needs and concerns of community members are. So I actually, Fred, thought we were not going to go in such detail about the survey. If there are questions on the survey, because you all have the summary in front of you. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. But I think it probably makes sense just to jump into the recommendations. And because you have those in front of you as well, I'm assuming I'm not going to read them for you, but I just want to highlight certain aspects of the recommendations. So I'll also just say from a personal perspective and professional perspective, as Associate Director of OLA, and for those in the public who might not know, OLA stands for Organización Latinoamericana, which is Latino American Organization. And we are Latino focused advocacy organization that's been on the East End since 2002. Our office happens to be in East Hampton Village, so right there in the center of things. And we're very pleased with the interactions we've had over the years, especially since 2016, 2017, with the police chief of East Hampton, with Mike Sarlo, and with other police chiefs in the area. So there have been some issues that we've been working on for some time. And so being a part of this committee was a great opportunity to share in this work with other community members. So I believe, the consensus I would say among committee members is that in general, things are going well in terms of police community relations, but there is always room for improvement, right? And I think everybody would acknowledge that, including the police chief. So the committee understood its role to be, or I was not so much its role, but it's the overarching goal to be improving police community relations, whatever that might look like, right? So everything that we'll be talking about today and everything that's in the plan really has an eye towards that. How can we strengthen the relationship between the community and the police so that there is more trust, more knowledge, more opportunities to exchange information and understand each other, and everything that entails. So there were several topics that the state asked the committee to consider in the police reform and reinvention process. And again, for the members of the public, the police reform and reinvention, that's a term that the state used. This was a mandate from the governor, Executive Order 203, if you want to look it up, that asked, or that required all municipalities in New York State to go through this process of police reform and reinvention. So I'm happy to say too that because I'm aware of how some other processes have gone further west on the island, even in other parts of New York State. And I think that our process was really admirably open and honest, and there was a good dialogue, and it was friendly. It was, I did not feel that there was anything contentious going on here, and it was in a collective spirit of wanting to really make things better for all community members. So with that in mind, and that spirit in mind, I'll say that the recommendations are divided broadly into several categories that align more or less with the categories that the state required that we address. We've changed the names some on some things because the state categories, there was kind of too much overlap, but basically all of the categories in a way dovetail with each other, and they dovetail into this larger goal of improving police community relations. So we've got the broad category of community outreach and trust building, broad category of transparency, accountability, concrete community needs, training and use of local resources, recruitment and hiring, and finally, police officer well-being. So we'll say too that, we certainly learned from Chief Sarlo some of the constraints that the police department has, including and especially financial constraints, and these are real and something that we all need to consider. However, the committee feels that those shouldn't be, an ultimate obstacle to achieving these goals. We also recognize that some goals or some recommendations the police department has already started implementing, and some of these can be completed by the end of the year, according to Chief Sarlo. Others will be medium, longer term, so 1 to 3 years before recommendations can be completed. And again, some recommendations will need substantially more funding in order to be completed. So let's just plunge right in then. With community outreach and trust building, I think nobody would dispute that there's a structural power relationship when we're talking about the police and the community. And so, the idea is what can we do to break that down a little bit? And, one way is through the sharing of information. Knowledge is power. And the more knowledge that community members have about the operations of the police department, then the more comfortable they are likely to feel when interacting with police officers. So with that in mind, some of the recommendations deal with two-way information sharing. So the police department holding different kinds of community forums, including virtual forums, now that we're all doing everything virtually, where the police can share from their perspective what an encounter looks like, whether it's a traffic stop or some other kind of encounter, arriving to a house on a DV call, domestic violence call, whatever it might be, and where the police can also listen to community members share their perspectives on what those encounters are like and what they need to see and what makes them feel powerless or afraid or whatever it might be. And also what makes them feel secure. What can a police officer do during the call, whatever the call might be, to make a community member feel secure. We understand too from Chief Sarlo that many community forums have been given over the years. Sometimes there is a challenge with attendance. And so with that in mind, we believe that engaging key community partners like nonprofit organizations in the community and houses of worship and other trusted institutions in the community for the police department to partner with, that will help to increase attendance at meetings. And I think also virtual forums will help to increase attendance. People don't have to drive anywhere. They can, sit there and learn. And I know that just very recently at OLA, we've appreciated the most recent collaboration with the police department, where a couple of police officers, including one Spanish-speaking police officer, gave a presentation to Latino parents about how to recognize and understand better the use of vaping paraphernalia and drug use among their teenagers. So this was something that really arose from the community. Latino parents wanted this. They worked with us, OLA, to make this happen. And then the police department was very cooperative in giving this presentation just a week or so ago. So we're happy about that. And then, also broaden the base of community members who follow the police on social media. So I know that is already underway. The police department now has an intern that is working on that. And that's great news. I would say, and we'll talk about language access later, but everything that the police department does, and for that matter, the town board does, really needs to happen in Spanish. I don't say this only because I am part of OLA of Eastern Long Island, but this is the consensus of the entire committee, that we need to really acknowledge that our community, our full community, speaks two languages. They speak English, or they speak Spanish, or they speak both, and we need to respond to that. Moving on to transparency. So here, the committee would like to see that as much as possible is posted on the website, whether that's the rules and procedures manual that the police use for their operations, any updates to that, reports, all of that. So I think that too is already underway. The annual report, I believe, is already posted anyway. So I know that the police chief has spoken with us about, the fact that a lot of that is underway. So yes, great, let's keep it up and let's do as much as possible in Spanish as well, so that it's accessible to all community members. A larger issue here is that community members in general, if they've never been a victim of a crime or never been detained for a crime or arrested, feel that police work is shrouded in mystery, and that police processes are shrouded in mystery. So if someone's a victim, for example, and has the initial encounter with the police, reports the crime, etc., then what we have found, and this is not necessarily with East Hampton Town Police Department, but just with police departments in general, that then the victim does not understand his or her rights. Do they have a right to call the police and ask for an update when they haven't heard from the police or the DA's office for 3 weeks, for example? What are they allowed and not allowed to do? What can they expect? What should they be able to expect in terms of follow-up, timing, conversations, etc. during this process? And that's just from the victim side. So, being very transparent and clear and just posting somewhere on the website or on social media, what these processes involve. If you are a victim of a crime, you are able to expect X, Y, Z. And then people feel like they have a voice, that they can step up and be heard, and that they don't have to wait and feel that they have to wait passively for the police department to call, for example, for the next conversation. So details about processes, whatever those processes might be. I'm using the victim process as an example, but it could be the complaint process. And other kinds of things that we've listed in detail in the recommendations. Related to transparency is accountability. So 2 main issues here, although not the only issues in the recommendations, but 2 things that I'll point out is the need to create a community review board. The police chief is also in favor of this, as he is in favor of many of the recommendations, if not all, perhaps all. And he understands that, the importance of continuing this process that we've begun in some way is key to making sure that community feels involved and connected to police, and that these recommendations continue to be implemented. So, we're calling it a CRB, Community Review Board. It would involve semi-annual meetings with the police chief to review progress on recommendations, and also to provide reviews of policy. So it's not just about the CRB, Community Review Board, focusing on this process that we've just gone through and the implementation of this process, but this is something we envision continuing for forever, right? That the some civilian body, I'm using your language, Chief Sarlo, civilian body or community body is there to always be aware of, on top of what's going on with procedures, with processes, with rules, etc., with the complaint process, including that. So the CRB would have that kind of responsibility and would meet at least twice a year with the police. Also, under accountability, the committee felt strongly that that body cameras are necessary. The survey also revealed that people do want body cameras, as well as in-dash car cameras. So the in-dash cameras already exist in the East Hampton Town Police Department. The body cameras do not. Now, we see this as a short-term goal, something that needs to happen as soon as possible. We do recognize, however, that there are funding constraints. So it's a heavy lift funding-wise to get body cameras for all police officers, as well as to provide the maintenance and the database upkeep and dealing with all kinds of of I don't know what it would be called, maintenance or processes that are related to the use of body cameras, including when body camera footage is required in court proceedings. So to make body camera footage available for court proceedings is not as easy as it sounds. There's a long involved process, and so that and the database upkeep, et cetera, tends to would require hiring at least one additional staff. So while we understand that there are funding constraints, we urge the town board to consider that in their budget and the allocation to the police department. And for this recommendation especially, and for some other recommendations, we would want to see also additional state and federal funding so that these things can be possible. Under accountability also, we would want to see as part of the annual report or as a separate document, updates on these recommendations, on progress made implementing these recommendations. So that is something that we'd want to see shared with the public, not just with the community review board. Moving on then to the broad category of concrete community needs. I'll just focus on one here, which is language access. And I'm focusing on this because it came up time and time again during committee meetings as well as plan drafting subcommittee meetings. And this is language access refers to making sure that all materials, all forums, all speech is available in the languages spoken in the community. So New York State has issued an executive order several years ago. I'm going to say 2006, 7, 8, something like that, saying that all any departments, state level departments that deal with the public need to provide forms and interpretation in the top 6 languages spoken in the state. Counties followed suit. So Suffolk County followed suit in 2011, I believe, with an executive order issued by County Executive Steve Bellone saying that the same thing, that any public-facing departments would need to provide all forms and documents as well as interpretation in the top 6 languages spoken in that community, or in this case, in Suffolk County. Spanish, of course, being the language with the largest number of speakers. So we would like to see this on a local level as well, both from the town board and from the police department. This is how you make community members, all community members, feel like they are a part of civic life, and it is how you make them feel welcome in the community. It doesn't happen overnight. A government entity, whether it's the police department or the town board or some other entity, might start providing interpretation, making documents available in Spanish, but that doesn't mean that, okay, next day everybody's going to show up to a police forum, right? If they speak Spanish. It's a process that takes time and patience. But if people do not feel that they are included in these processes and in information, then it's very hard to have them show up ever to forums and to be part of that trust building process. So language access is not only important, it's also a civil right. It is part of, and I'm going to forget which title it is, Title 6, I believe, not sure, of the Civil Rights Act or Civil Rights Law that mandates that there should be no discrimination based on nationality, ethnicity, race, sex, etc. So this includes and provides for language access for folks who do not yet speak English. We appreciate very much that one of the recommendations is already underway. So Language Line, which is a professional telephone interpretation service, is now available to police officers because we have provided police officers with, OLA has provided police officers with cell phones dedicated solely to the use of Language Line, so that if a police officer arrives at a home where there are only Spanish speakers, or where there is a family member who really should not be put in the position of translating or of interpreting, then the police officer would avail him or herself of Language Line by dialing that number, and then the three-way conversation, including the interpreter on the other end of language line, begins. And so that is a much more effective way, even though there are problems with language line, there are problems with any kind of system, but it's a much more effective way of dealing with community members rather than relying on family members or friends in the household to provide interpretation. Use of local resources. So some of this is already underway as well. One recommendation encourages using the expertise of local nonprofits to provide trainings and information to police forces, in this case, our police force, East Hampton Town Police Department. And I know that we at OLA and also Loretta Davis of the Retreat are giving presentations pretty much as we speak to the police department right now. So a couple of presentations have already happened. I think that's going to go on for a few more weeks. And that kind of connection with nonprofits is very important because we are so connected to our communities, and it also allows for this two-way exchange of information that I've been discussing all along here. The survey indicated, and the committee also believes, that bringing in mental health professionals during certain kinds of encounters with the police or that the police are called to respond to is very important. So for example, domestic violence calls, sexual assault calls, calls that deal with someone who has mental illness or someone who has overdosed. These kinds of calls really, and encounters between the police and community members would really benefit from having mental health professionals there. And survey takers strongly recognize that. We would also like to see trainings that are specifically about unconscious bias and or racial profiling, which are two different things, but there is some overlap. It's not to accuse a police department of systemic racism, but it is to acknowledge that we all, as human beings, operate with certain kinds of unconscious biases, whether those biases have to do with race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, or other kinds of things. And that it's important, especially for a police department, to address unconscious bias that each individual police officer may have. It's something that is happening all over the country in institutions of higher learning, for example, and it's important for police departments to do this as well. Racial profiling also. Many community members feel that they are targeted due to their race or ethnicity or nationality. If it seems that someone is from a Latin American country, they can, often feel targeted by the police. And I've spoken just informally with non-Latino members of the community, Caucasian members of the community, who have remarked to us that they see that the police tend to stop people of color, including Latino immigrants or Latinos who were born here, at a higher rate than they stop Caucasians. So something that should help with this, I think, is making sure, and this is one of the recommendations, and the police chief has said this is already underway, making sure that any arrest or traffic stop data includes the race or ethnicity of the person, so that it's easily identifiable, so that people can track, and so the police department can track patterns if there are any patterns, and if any of this information is foiled, so that patterns can be tracked if there are patterns of more people of color or Latinos being stopped, for example. Moving on to recruitment and hiring. We're almost at the end here, folks. I thank you for your patience and your attention. The consensus was that we absolutely need a more diverse police force. Right now, out of a force of 65 officers, 4 are Latino officers. 5 police officers speak Spanish, so 4 of them being Latino and 1 being non-Latino but bilingual. There's one African-American detective, no African-American police officers. There are 9 women, and of these women, one of them is a sergeant. So in total, there are 7 bilingual staff members, so 5 police officers and then 2 other police staff, dispatchers, et cetera, who, including non-Latinos, who are bilingual. And so that's something. There is someone there to provide some interpretation during interviews and calls and things like that. However, to have a police force that more accurately reflects the community that it represents and that it serves and protects is very important. So the committee understands the barriers that there are to recruitment. Not only the civil service test, but people cannot apparently have any kind of record whatsoever, even if it was a minor, violation or misdemeanor breaking of the law, et cetera, when they were younger. Those barriers are not, my understanding is that those barriers are not set by our local police department, but they are set by the county, correct? So we would like to see our local police department advocate on behalf of trying to break down some of those barriers so that more people can be recruited and increase the diversity of the department. And that involves different kinds of outreach to youth, different kinds of presentations, et cetera. So again, going back to community forums and things like that. And then finally, in relation to police officer well-being, because the committee recognizes that being a police officer is incredibly hard and stressful, and they are dealing with extreme things that most members of the public will never see. So recognizing this, we believe that, and we do understand from the chief that there are some structures in place already to help officers who are dealing with mental health issues related to their jobs, and maybe even not related to their jobs, just with life in general. But in order to change the culture of police departments, where, in the past especially, you had to be strong, you couldn't cry, you just had to suck everything up and just live with the stress and not talk about it. We, as a committee, understand the importance of encouraging and allowing counseling and when it's called for, substance abuse rehabilitation, and allowing time off for this and making sure that no stigma is attached. So it seems that would involve conversations with the entire police force about, that this is appropriate, that there's nothing to be ashamed of in relation to reaching out for help. And I'll end there. Thank you very much. And any questions for Fred or for me?
Well, I think before I would recommend, before we get into questions, the chief also had a number of recommendations. So why don't we have Chief Sarlo take us through, his recommendations and what he's, started to implement. And then I think we can discuss the plan.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Chief, you want to run through your list of recommendations and what you've been working on? I know that our local force had already implemented a number of initiatives that became part of the state mandate ahead of the state mandate. And so we're pretty proactive. And I have to say, we're very fortunate to have a police chief that is such an excellent communicator, and you've really had terrific engagement through your website and community forums and whatnot to date. So, again, I have a great deal of support and respect for you and the department. And as Sandra said, I think we all recognize that there are ways we can improve and have better outreach and communication with the community. So with that said, Chief, you have some comments to add at this point?
Sure. First, I want to thank everybody who participated in the committee process. It was some excellent dialogue. I think a lot of very well thought out ideas, questions, information exchange. It was extremely productive. I think we all learned a lot from each other. I thank the support of the board and several members of the committee for really putting some time and effort into doing homework on policy and procedure. It was not a lot of time was wasted, and it was very productive. And I think we're in a very good place moving forward with this plan. Essentially, as we got started on this process, I shared with the committee that a number of the initiatives or recommendations that were brought forth by the state were already actively engaged and in progress by our department. Things like updating our rules of our policy and procedure manual, changing some of our use of force policies, the campaigns to engage the community and be more transparent with sharing information through social media and community forums. Some of our training, as Sandra mentioned, we have OLA and the retreat in together to do back-to-back presentations to our officers yearly. And that is a great exchange of information where our officers understand what the advocates see as needs in the services provided to people who need the retreat or who work with OLA and our members of the community who may feel underserved or vulnerable. And it's a great opportunity for our officers to hear that and really understand how we can do better in those situations and how we can work together and provide better services. We're doing right now, as we speak, bias-free policing, the federally mandated course that the Suffolk County Police had run a few years ago, and we had put all of our officers through. We've now got an updated version of that class and certified instructors to teach it. And we're doing this annually, and it's already started. And it's recognizing implicit bias. It's understanding how your own personal interactions and how your experience as a police officer can shape your interactions and opinions of people that you come in contact with. Understanding that, recognizing it, and trying to work to be better at that in your performance of your duties and ensure that people are treated fairly and equitably. Ongoing, documented, certified, and we're in it right now. Additionally, we have some areas of community outreach and improvements we feel we can make that, the committee was very receptive to. We'd like to try to reinstitute our Citizens Police Academy. We would like to get more members of the community involved in seeing some of the training that we go through, really trying to understand what the officer's perspective is when handling calls so that they can, get a better grasp and understanding of what the officer's primary goal is in officer safety and in civilian safety and in, trying to resolve disputes and handle things with the best possible outcome for the community. One thing that's really become very clear is, this whole idea of being a good communicator is extremely important to good police work, but also in the relationship between the department and the community. There's a lot of things that we have done over the years to share information with the community about drug trends, about youth, vulnerable youth, and the things that they face in cyber bullying, and really focusing on crime prevention and sharing with many different aspects of the community and doing online forums, in-person forums at the school, at the town board level. And our audience is too small, and we haven't been reaching enough people within the community to share that information. So, we have a very good solid foundation of what we see as the needs of the community are and what we must share with the community to help foster a better relationship, more accountability, more transparency, finding ways to get that information out in as broad-based forum as we possibly can and engage as many people in the community as we can is one of our big hurdles. As Sandra mentioned, we have an intern who's working with us on developing some little 20-second, 30-second, 45-second video clips that kind of let us speak to the community directly and share information about traffic stops, about reporting a crime, about crime victims' rights, about translation services, about the process that someone must go through if they're arrested for a crime. Just really trying to make sure the public has as much information about what to expect and what to understand about their interactions with a uniformed police officer when they're placed in that situation. and really getting that information back to our police officers to make sure that they understand not every interaction they go into, just because they've been trained and they have the knowledge of how to handle that. We can't have unrealistic expectations that every community member understands that process and is prepared to handle that situation the way we expect them to. So really a lot of listening, a lot of information sharing, and a lot of the general theme of improving training, improving communication, and improving the cooperation between the community and the police. I'm very grateful for the work of the committee. I think we have a lot of solid ideas and real tangible ways to go about improving some of these relationships moving forward. And it's a very challenging time for all of us in law enforcement. I think, we can't lose sight of the fact that, despite all of our goodwill and intentions that we have amongst the community, and so many of our officers do many altruistic acts and help the community, and we do far more to support people in our community than we do to arrest them or to issue them summonses or handle them in a negative way. It's those negative contacts and it's those difficult situations where emotions are heightened and there's maybe alcohol or drugs involved, and people are victims of crimes or feel that they've been victimized or injured in an incident where some of those negative interactions really paint a much broader brush on the interactions between the police and the community. So it can be very challenging to still maintain that level of authority and that level of need for issuing commands and directives and being the authority figure, and balancing that out with providing the services and being an engaged part of the support part of the community. So it's a challenging, changing time in policing. And I think this whole process is going to help us achieve some of those goals and get better at it. And, the more we listen to each other, the better we'll be, and the more progress we'll make in police reform across the country. And I hope, the community knows that we're here to listen and we're here to work with you. And I think we're in a very good spot moving forward with this plan.
Thank you very much, Chief. Any questions for Chief or Sandra at this point? If
questions are just discussion.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say we could move on to the discussion by board members at this point if you don't have any specific questions right away for the Chief or Sandra. So
I wanted to ask the chief about, for the folks at home, I kind of audited the class of the police committee. I wanted to be on it, but was not selected.
Jeff, I think it's worth mentioning that you did participate in a number of the meetings, and as the public may or may not know, that you can't have active engagement by more than 2 board members outside of a public meeting. You form a quorum, but it should be recognized that you did participate in a listening mode. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Chief, I just wanted to ask you about the body cameras.
Sure.
Because when I also felt pretty strongly that that's a good idea, just because it's a mechanism for greater transparency.
Sure.
I think it's good for the police and for the public, frankly.
Right.
The numbers didn't look that big to me. The cost of it. I saw that there's ongoing expenses after the initial purchase of the equipment, but it was basically, if I remember correctly, it was about $50,000 and then $15,000 a year. I just wanted to get your take on that. It seems like something we should do.
Well, that's an estimate, and the issue we have, Councilman, is that we can probably come up with capital funds to purchase them, but we're starting to face a mounting problem with several of the programs we've initiated through capital projects. Once the initial payment is made and once the initial costs are absorbed for maintenance and software agreements, we then have to roll back those into our annual budget. And between the speed monitoring devices, the in-car camera, dashboard cameras, there's a number, I can go down a list. They start to tack on to our annual budget in my 8% of my operating budget that is actually has to stay within the state tax
Tax
cap
cap.
limits.
Right, yeah.
And
Yes,
when all of our other things roll in and increase, so, I've got the speed signs for 2 years with the cloud agreement and the maintenance agreement, and it's been donated and there's no cost to anybody. But on the third year, I now have a per year cost to use the cloud services. I have a per year cost for the maintenance agreement if I need any, repairs, troubleshooting done remotely. And those are starting to add up to a point where it's getting very challenging to continue to absorb those into the regular operating budget. That's one hurdle, which we're hoping at some point there will be federal or state funding available for some of these initiatives. The other hurdle is really, you're probably looking at an additional employee to download the data and to maintain the database. We are looking at, through discovery changes, through the criminal justice reform from New York State, basically within 2 weeks of an arrest, where our entire database package for that arrest needs to be uploaded and distributed out through the DA's office and to the defense to meet discovery. And, already right now we have dash cameras. So all of our DWIs, all of our aggravated unlicensed, all of our traffic accidents, everything is on video recording in front of the police car. So we have to store and download all of that information and burn it and upload it into the cloud or send it on disk. We have cameras here in headquarters, in the hallways, in the cell area, in the interview rooms, at the back of the building where the vehicle comes in. Those all need to be tabbed, recorded, uploaded, distributed. It's hours and hours of work to meet the new discovery laws. And when you add body camera footage for every single call the police go on, it's just exhaustive, the amount of hours. There's also additional costs where we probably need another server, and we need at least, some maintenance agreements and tech support for that server. It's just exponential increase. It's not to say that I don't support body cameras, and I tell anybody on the committee who's heard me say this, it's just as much for the transparency and to protect the police officer
Right.
from the frivolous claims. And, the number, as our 50A release of discipline records will show, the number of times an officer is accused of something, and then we go back to the dash camera footage and it's the officer is exonerated or the case is unsubstantiated based on the footage that we have in front of us, so far outweigh any negatives to the officer. So I support it. It's just a matter of finding the right way to fit it in, not only financially, but with personnel, and to be able to make sure that we're meeting discovery. It's challenging. We're spending a lot more time processing arrests, even though we're making a lot less arrests. And it's something that we agree to as a committee as a goal. It's just that we need to kind of take our time to walk into it to make sure that we have the funding and the personnel available to do it properly. So it's more of a long-term goal than an immediate goal.
Yeah, this has been a discussion that Chief and I have had initially just with the new discovery requirements, because these mandates come down without any additional funding, and they come regularly where there are new mandates that the department or the town has to meet without any additional funding source, and yet we're constrained by 2% tax cap. The initial capital costs, as Chief said, are not an obstacle, but when you look at what it generates in terms of demand for resources on the personnel side, it becomes very significant in a very short period of time. And I think everybody, to the Chief's point, everybody on the committee agreed that dash cams would benefit both the officers and those interacting with them. And we need to try to figure out if we can't get greater support and implement that. So that's certainly a goal that I think we'll continue to have. I don't know how the other board members feel about it, but we'll certainly keep that on our radar.
I think that's also, the tax cap, I'm very supportive, and I'm actually within what the draft that was sent to me reading over is very, very thorough. Sandra and Fred, and congratulations. You guys have led our volunteer corps of our community for this outreach, and I commend you for that. A lot of time, you can easily tell that. But the tax cap and the recommendation from the town has to go to Albany also, and let them know that there is going to be these finances that we have to look into our operating budgets, and you have to give us a little relief on that tax cap, specifically for their initiatives on there then too. One of my other questions I have is just about the language access and language lines. And a lot of the discussion was also for just for Spanish translation. As a person of myself of Asian descent right now, I think we would want to make sure that any type of language access or to the language line would be for all languages. We have a very large Caribbean languages coming here, Eastern European, Asian population. So let's make sure it's language access for all also on that. And I think that would be great. And that would cover a lot of our melting pot of East Hampton that we have then too.
Just to clarify that the language line does give us access to pretty much any language that there is. So we dial in through AT&T and we have an access code and a number, and we state which language we need translation assistance in. And then we are tapped through to an operator who is fluent in that language. And we work together with that operator. And, you know, just so you know, a few of the obstacles that we have faced and what we try to, it's one of the reasons it took us a little while to work through this process of accepting the phones from OLA is there are issues with court cases with the admissibility of the translation and whether or not we can get the call recorded or not. So I was somewhat hesitant in the beginning because we can gather a lot of information at the scene of an incident that's never going to be admissible because we don't have certified translation services, and I can't submit to court a certified transcript of the translation. So, you know, we've traditionally in policing, you try to get someone to a desk sitting across from someone, face-to-face contact, and do a translation, or use the translation through the language line service from a phone that's being recorded, and then they can provide that to you. You know, there's improvements in language line. They're working on transcripts. They're working on recordings. What's admissible and what's not is being, you know, worked through. We're just trying to provide as much language access to be able to determine what services are needed, what incident is being reported, what crime may be committed, and really put community members at ease to feel that they are understood and heard and that we can work with them. That's the main goal there.
I think there was general agreement among all the committee members that having better outreach and communication with non-English speaking people was very important. And to Sandra's point about trying to get, you know, all forms, translated and available in Spanish, particularly given our high Spanish speaking population, is something that the town has worked to try and do. I have had a recent conversation with Councilwoman Bert Gonzalez about our town website, and apparently there is an opportunity for us to put a translation widget on that town website that Kathy has made me aware of. And so we're working to do that so that a person could simply click on that and it would automatically translate everything on the site. That would be a wonderful improvement. We've been pretty consistent, I would say, in getting out important messages across our social media platform and on the website in both English and Spanish, including having set up a standalone web portal for vaccination registration, which is in both English and Spanish. So, you know, it's an ongoing effort. It's one that we think is extremely important. We're not 100% yet, but we hope to get there.
Can I just jump in just so that folks that are watching can, if they go to the town website, they can click on government, and under town board are all the work session materials for today. So the plan is there with all of the appendices. And just so folks know, included in the appendices are the minutes of the committee meetings, the survey results, the youth survey results, and the public comments that we've received during this process. So again, it's on the town website under government, town board, and you'll find the link to work session materials.
Thank you for that, Kathy. And I know that we'll be putting out a flyer on social media about the upcoming listening session on this draft preliminary plan, which will be on the 11th. That's Thursday, 7 p.m. on LTV. So we're getting ready to send that out this morning, another blast with that information. And we'll try to get maybe that link to that location on the website so those materials could also be reviewed by folks just in that same announcement. Any other questions at this point or further discussion on, for instance, any of the topics we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one comment. It actually kind of echoes something that Chief Sarlo said. You know, I've said it before that I think he's a very good leader and great communicator. And, you know, I would call him a very progressive police chief. But, you know, it caught my ear when you said your audience is too small. I know we've talked about that before in the committee. And I know that the department has worked hard to get a bigger audience, and it is hard, and I know we're going to continue to do that. But I do note that we got, I think it was 35 responses from Spanish-speaking residents in town, and you know, while it gives you a number to work with a little bit, it's really way too small. And I don't say that as a criticism, because, you know, as I said, I've been watching the meetings and listening with great interest to what's going on, and I can, you know, I've seen the hard work, but somehow we've got to break out of that and get we've got to get more contact with a very large Spanish-speaking population that we have. You know, it permeates the town. Actually, I had an interview with a college applicant just a few weeks ago who was Spanish-speaking, and he was saying there's only like one Spanish-speaking counselor in the high school for I don't know how many kids, like 50% of the class. So I'm just hoping, I know this is not news to anybody sitting on that committee or to the chief. I just think maybe Sandra's suggestions that we use, you know, the churches and trusted leaders and community groups to just try to break through. We really need to get more engagement. And that was one of the main, you know, purposes of the re-envisioning process that the governor set out for us. But again, I say that not as a criticism of the work, just to say that it's a recurring problem, and I know it's one that Mike has wrestled with for years, frankly.
Jeff, you're absolutely right, and you know, it's something as town board members that we struggle with for years and years, trying to get engagement and response from that community, particularly with our efforts. And you know, we're very pleased to have Ola working with us on this committee and, you know, doing outreach to that community. But it just shows, even with Ola's involvement, the numbers were painfully low, really, in response. I think, you know, just a very, very small percentage. And in fact, it was such a small percentage of responses that statistically their answers can't really be relied upon because of such small sampling size as a group. So, you know, we know that that's something we just have to figure out how to do a better job of. And again, to your point, Jeff, I think trying to engage those who are influential within those communities and to radiate out through those lines of communication and trusted networks to get better engagement is something we'll have to continue doing, you know, always. And Sandra, I see you're raising your hand. You probably want to comment on that.
Thank you. Thanks for your remarks, Jeff and Peter. I just want to say that, you know, just bouncing off of what you were saying, Jeff, that, you know, when the committee was first formed, Ola was not a part of it, and no Latino community members were a part of it. And there was just one African American person who was a part of it. So it you know, while we say yes, you know, rely on us as nonprofit people, as people connected to the community to you know, help in building relationships, it can't be exclusively through us. And you know, it's happened time and time again in the past. So you know, ideally going forward, the town board town board in this instance, in formations of committees like this, whether it's police focused or any other kind of committee, would just always from the very beginning include Latino community members, because it's not that we have some separate Latino community out there. It is our community. It's one full, complete community that happens to have a substantial percentage of Latinos in it. So we don't say, oh, the Latino community, we say Latino community members or African American community members.
I agree with
I
that.
just want to make it clear, I don't think there was ever a point in which we weren't going to be including Latino community members specifically in this organization and committee of a committee, because this is exactly, the community members that we do want to outreach to. And apparently we still have fallen short of where we would like to be. We certainly are taking all the comments that we've received thus far, and they are significant, and we'll pay a lot of attention to them, but it's a very small sample size. It statistically, can be problematic in terms of representing the broader number of people who were not engaged and didn't respond to our outreach. So Fred, I see you have your hand raised. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, no, thank you. Perhaps you guys are already doing this. I don't know, but I'm just wondering, I'm thinking about this community review board. And perhaps there's a similar board or a committee of some sort that's just focused on what we're talking about right this moment to find a way to engage the more, the diversity of the community in a very compelling way.
Right. No, we did have a Latinx community advisory board, which happened to the formation of which, and Sandra's well aware of this, was formed shortly before an administration that made it their top priority to try to identify, non-citizens and deport them. And it had a very chilling effect in terms of trust of government, whether members of that community were documented or not. And that committee kind of went underground and was even afraid to come and meet at town hall at a certain point. So, we've had a step back where we've had setbacks, and we do need to continue to move forward.
I'll just add that if we're talking about the same East Hampton Town Hispanic Advisory Committee from years and years ago, over a decade ago, it was formed in the late 90s. You're talking about a different one?
Talking about the reformulation of it, because the initial one had, I don't know what happened with that. I wasn't on the town board, but there was
that one became OLA. So the members, a lot of the members who were part of the East Hampton Town Latino Advisor, it was called Hispanic back then, I think, Hispanic Advisory Board back in the 90s. They, just felt it made sense after a while to form an organization, and that was really the birth of OLA. So, and Peter, what I was referring to earlier, just to wrap that up, is that we at OLA basically invited ourselves onto this committee. And so we were very grateful that that everybody agreed to have us on the committee. But the first community meeting, there were no members of the Latino community at that meeting. And because none were on the committee yet, I brought on one member, and Tom Flight brought on another member. So that's what I'm referring to.
OLA was in the first meeting.
I was in the first meeting.
Yeah,
yes.
I just want to make it clear that we didn't have a first meeting without at least OLA being involved, and we appreciate the fact that you were able to bring in additional community members. Again, outreach is something we continually need to work on to be able to identify folks to be involved. So.
Yeah, and some of the folks we identified that we reached out to just didn't have the time in their schedule to be able to be on the committee or meet during the day. But I was wondering if I had a couple questions and some thoughts that I wanted to bring forth. And one is, and it's actually a question to the chief. On page 10 under transparency, it says ensure that all arrest records include data on race and ethnicity. I mean, are the forms that you use, are they something that you have control over of what the questions asked? Are you following a form, and is that information able to be obtained?
And
So
can I just add one part to that question? Because I had a similar question about that. How would you go about identifying ethnicity in a traffic stop or arrest anyway?
Yep. So I've explained this offline a little bit, and I kind of went over it last time we met with the committee. We have the capability of having a field, which our records management system has worked with us on setting up, to be able to enter in race or ethnicity, and that's available to us. In arrests, typically there is demographic questioning that goes on where we get a real good biographical background of the person because they're sitting at a desk being interviewed, and we try to get as accurate information on the person as we possibly can. So we're pretty confident that that data that will be generated during our arrests will be fairly accurate and will meet, federal guidelines for delineating based on race or ethnicity. The issue that we have moving forward, we've kind of kick this up the chain of command to the state level through the Chiefs of Police Association to inquire as to some parameters and guidelines to be set forth in traffic stops for determining race or ethnicity. We're actually looking at, there should be some sort of delineation and maybe even formal process to put a code on driver's licenses so that the officer does not need to inquire. And we really don't want to add that type of inquiry into the officer's line of questioning in a traffic stop. And, it leaves open a lot of subjective work by the officer. You can't just go by surname, and you can't go by basically what the officer thinks someone might appear to be. So that type of information is something that we are willing to work on. We have the ability to generate it in our records management system. However, right now, we don't feel comfortable taking that step until we get guidance from state or the feds about how to go about doing that in a fair and accurate manner.
I can only imagine what the person being stopped might feel like if the officer asked them,
Correct.
what is your ethnic background? Like, they're going to wonder, like, why is that important? What does that have to do with my being pulled over? And, in terms of traffic stops, and Sandra, you talked about, there was a large number within, you said it was many feel targeted because of the high rate of traffic stops, from our Latino community members, I guess. And, I know that in talking to the chief, the number of traffic stops that are generated by vehicle maintenance issues, turn signals, headlights out, the condition of the vehicle itself, tinted glass. Those are all reasons that an officer would pull someone over. It's usually, it's a safety related issue. And so that's how it starts. So the condition of one's vehicle is a major reason for why one would get a traffic stop. And I think, another might be just not being fully aware or following the traffic procedures of, coming to a full stop at an intersection, et cetera.
My very brief comment on that, Peter, is in some of my discussions with Minerva from OLA early on when the organization was first started, and also some comments made by one of the reform committee members, Gordon Ryan, who actually, as a defense attorney, represents quite a number of people in traffic court. He sees, and I saw in my discussions with community members and in reviewing our arrest databases, some real need for outreach, advocacy, and education with many of our Spanish-speaking drivers in our community in order to ensure full and accurate understanding of the vehicle and traffic laws and how minor violations can lead to larger issues for the driver. In other words, you're stopped for a very minor violation, for an equipment violation. It turns out the insurance is expired or the registration's expired, and the defendant in that case doesn't pay their tickets because they just assume, I don't have a driver's license, I'm not going to pay the tickets, or I can't afford it right now, I'll just wait and I'll pay it later. Ultimately, we send all that information through the justice court, it gets through the DMV, that operator is, a client ID number is generated for them in the DMV system. And ultimately, if they fail to appear or fail to pay their fines, that subject is noted as either suspended or revoked for their privileges to operate a vehicle in the state. So then upon being pulled over again for another minor violation 6 months or a year later, end up getting arrested for aggravated unlicensed charges and brought in and processed. So there's some changes going through the legislature right now with the degrees of aggravated unlicensed cases that can be actually brought in for a physical arrest. Most of those cases are now being handled on a field appearance ticket and given another court date. But there are still certain levels of aggravated unlicensed, suspended registration, suspended license that require a physical arrest and lead to, a lot more implications for the driver. And what we've really done in digging through a lot of our data and our arrest numbers and in working with both OLA and the Justice Court and some of the advocacy people is we really need to do a much better job of trying to educate and teach drivers of the long-term implications of some of these minor violations piling up on their vehicle or on their driver's license.
So we did talk, pretty extensively within the committee about traffic stops. Particularly, it's likely to be the most common way that the general public interacts with our local police department, and just being able to educate the entire public as to what they should do when they get pulled over. This is a situation that raises anxiety for both the person being pulled over and it's potentially a very dangerous situation for a police officer. Police officer approaching the vehicle doesn't know who they've pulled over. It could be somebody smuggling drugs. It could be, somebody who's on has an arrest warrant for a serious crime, violent crime. So as they approach the vehicle, they don't know who they're dealing with. And the person in the vehicle might have apprehension about that interaction as well. So, I think having, you talked about putting out little small video clips or whatever and whatnot. There's certainly an opportunity that the committee had discussed for improving that basic knowledge base of the general public. And we can target it to maybe those who are less familiar even more, whether it be through driver's ed in high school or reaching out to Latinx community members to just inform them as to what you should do to lower the anxiety level and potential threat level, and make that interaction much smoother, to make them aware of how to avoid getting a traffic stop in the first place. To your point, Chief, that was discussed. So I think, we certainly have room, and it should be, I think, one of the goals of the plan to try to work on improving the community's understanding of that.
Absolutely.
And then as far as, we want to do an annual survey. I think we learned a lot doing the survey this go round. I think it would probably behoove us to have a debrief with the committee, or at the very least, the survey subcommittee to, figure out how we would do things, differently, better, how we could, increase the participation in the survey. I know it tended to skew older and white, and how we can, increase our outreach efforts moving forward now that we want to do it on an annual basis.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, and then, looking at the plan, there's, a couple of areas where the committee is recommending that we, hire personnel. We talked already about if we were to go to body cameras, we probably would have to hire a staff member. There's a recommendation about hiring a translator or interpreter that's in there. And we should be putting out everything, in English and Spanish, but, that's a commitment of funds, and would have to be a priority of our board to do that. And it may even be somebody that we could share, with the police department and, with town staff. Because I think that's something we need to move forward on. It talks about hiring or increasing enforcement during the summertime when quality of life issues are most challenged with the influx of people and parties and overcrowded housing and music and noise and whatnot. It also talked about hiring a PR firm, which I personally don't necessarily agree with. I think that that is something that could become, I think that it's so many things were pointed out and discussed at the meetings, and as far as how moving forward the police department can be more transparent and more accountable. I just know that they, dealing with such sensitive information that they deal with, I just don't think that is the answer, I guess. I think that it's something that they could do internally with staff. It also talks about, and I know that this came back in the survey, about having, hiring a mental health professional, someone that could be there to respond with the police, with our, EMS, to cases of domestic violence, sexual assault, mental illness, or, alcohol poisoning or drug overdose. And, I think that that's a model, but I don't know. And I'm not suggesting we don't include it in the plan, but that is something that that's a lot to wrap our arms around as far as having someone in that capacity. And obviously it wouldn't be one person because, police get, 911 gets called 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it would have to be, a team, or I would imagine 3 or more, mental health professionals that could respond in that way. And I just think that, I don't know of any, I don't know, Chief, if you know of any law enforcement or any other community, whether that's in the New York State or, across the country, that has implemented that kind of a response team. But while it's definitely aspirational and something that, I think would be helpful to see, I don't know how to execute it, I guess, is, how to
Kathy,
make that work.
there's been 1 or 2 metropolitan police forces that have started to try to enlist more social services to assist them. And, you're talking about rural, we're in a much more rural setting. In an urban setting where you have, districts and blocks, and you're in a city area, you can assign, social services support staff through a city or a county or a state to support and try to respond when they can. When you're in a community like ours, even a county like ours, as spread out as we are, and with the limited resources available through the Department of Health and things like that, we're 70 square miles. Southampton's right next door to us. It's just the reality of trying to have an available professional to respond in real time, 24/7, is just something that the system is not set up for, and the professionals are not available. It's just something that gets discussed quite often, and unfortunately, it's not a reality. We do tremendous amount of training on handling mental health crises, on dealing with emotionally disturbed persons, handling family disputes, particularly involving developmentally disabled, handicapped. On and on and on. The level of training that we get. Police officers, for what it's worth, the varied roles that they have to play, by the time you're 10 years into a police career, you practically have a psychology degree. And, we handle and diffuse situations over and over and over again as safely and as well as we possibly can. I know there was a lot of publicity over an incident that happened last week where, there was a family dispute with an emotionally disturbed person. Our ESU team, there was a barricaded subject, and our ESU team, had to eventually bring that person into custody and deliver them to psychiatric and medical help. And, unfortunately, some of these things, and I had mentioned this with the committee at the very beginning, it's a nice goal, and everyone would say, yeah, it'd be great if there was an extra social worker or a psychologist around to handle these calls, or a mental health professional or substance abuse professional. But, when that call comes into 911 at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, the police officer on the street who's working that sector has to go to that call. And, we have a duty to respond, under mental hygiene law. We have a duty to take certain necessary actions. There's a lot of layers of change that would need to happen on a state and federal level in order to change our response or the services available in those types of situations, unfortunately.
So I don't personally think it's a realistic goal, to have a real-time on-staff response every time that type of call, those types of calls come in. I wonder though if there couldn't be, and there probably, I think there probably is already some referral system in place.
Absolutely.
But that, follow up and referral be made so that in the case of domestic or sexual abuse or psychiatric issues, mental health, that there is a clear chain of follow-up by mental health professional.
That's all in place already. And there's the county's trying to improve availability of those services. They're trying to stretch their services east as much as they possibly can to limit the amount of time and distance we have to transport somebody to get them into that care initially. So a lot of those things are already in process and are already trying to be, improved upon as we speak.
Do you maintain a list of, do you have a list of mental health professionals? I don't want to jump in and give the appearance of micromanaging this, but I do want to say I think it's one of the recommendations that I think would have the most profound effect on the nature of policing to bring in, psychiatric professionals. I'm just wondering, because I know we have a community of social workers and psychologists. I'm just wondering if some of them might volunteer to be on call. I don't mean
Jeff, unfortunately, a lot of things have to change in policy and procedure for us to, we can't just go say, hey, jump in the car with us. We're going to go to this call. If that person were to get injured at that call, the liability issues that are in play because we brought them there or we allowed them to come into that situation. There's a lot of levels of changes in protocols that would need to happen before that we could do that. We can't say just let the social worker go and we'll stand by and see if see if they can handle it, or come with us and we'll see if we can handle the situation and keep you safe at the same time. Unfortunately, that's not the protocols, and that's not legally. By all means, if a family member or friends want to try to utilize social services first and have a professional handle the situation safely without having to call the police or without bringing us in, that's great. But when we're called, then we have to follow our protocols and take the necessary steps to safely handle that situation, that individual, and the people they're in contact with. So I
just wonder if, again, I'm not trying to belabor this, but I just wonder if having somebody, it does appear that the police would have to be the first contact. I just wonder how you feel if it were possible to have somebody as, a potential team member sort of behind you in the event that the situation seemed to, whether that would be something that would be helpful to you is what I guess I'm asking.
It could be. Every situation is so different that there's just no way, it's one situation, it may work out perfectly and be a big help to us. Another situation might not make any difference at all. And, the person might be combative and irrational and refuse to comply with anyone. We might have to tase them and handcuff them and take them into custody because they don't hurt themselves or someone else anyway. So there's just so many variables in play. I leave this to I honestly, it's okay that the question was included in the survey, but I made it clear to the committee that it's not something we can even entertain until it's passed down, not only procedurally, legally, and available personnel that we wouldn't even be able to. This is 7 to 10 years down the road before changes happen structurally through the federal, state, county level that would allow us to even start doing something like that.
I think this question comes up, partially in response to what we've seen in some other localities across the country, a number of instances where somebody with mental health issues, the situation ended up in the death of that individual, and circumstances, vary from case to case. But the fact that a person that in some of those cases, use of force or whatever was was misused and individuals perished or were severely injured as a result, has brought national attention to the issue in light of everything else that's gone on this past year. If they could put a much finer focus and a microscope on everything. And again, I think it's aspirational. I think, as you say, Chief, your people have to be trained to deal with every kind of situation and to de-escalate it and to be sure that there's never a situation where excessive force is used in resolving a situation. And I see, Sandra, you've raised your hand. I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the mental health professional, I think that this process is called police reform and reinvention for a reason, presumably, by the state. And so much of it will involve, it's not, as you're saying, Chief, that you can just, bring a mental health professional with you on a call and then that checks that box. No, so much of it is going to involve real systemic change over time. But it's the systemic change part. So when you were referring to the changing of protocols and everything would have to be revamped, et cetera, it's precisely that needs to happen. And if that needs to happen at a higher level, from what I'm understanding from you, federal and state regulations and protocols and things that you need to operate under, then that's where it needs to happen. But to have it as something aspirational, as you were saying, Peter, is important, because if it doesn't get mentioned and it doesn't get included, then it will never happen. But if it's there, then it's a piece of systemic change that will be considered going forward. It won't fall away.
Yeah, it's clearly an acknowledgement that this is an area where improvement could be made. And it's reform and reinvention. They left out the word funding, which would be the third component.
I completely agree.
It's an important component that is missing so far. And if we can make it, police reinvention, reform, and funding, it will go from being aspirational, I think, to something we could actually do in a more concrete way, in a more significant and meaningful way. So it's, that's another aspect that honestly, I think we should include in the plan. And I don't think it was discussed, frankly, that we should recommend that there be increased state and federal funding to police departments so that we can deal directly with this issue. This is something we kind of, we talked about why we were constrained, but we never addressed in this plan that really we should be asking for more funding. And I know there's been, one of the phrases that I think is really unfortunate that came out of this past year was defund the police. And if anything, I think this points out how we need to actually increase funds, but direct them to more specific areas that need to be improved. And mental health, having a mental health professional available, is another aspect that, I think we should ask for more funding as part of this plan.
And I think that acknowledgement, particularly under, because this falls under trainings and use of local resources and expertise, it needs context, I guess, is my point. It's not just bring in a mental health service professional to provide these services. It needs the context of what we just discussed now.
My 2 cents on that is a few of those minor points could be included in the plan under the community and the committee see a need for some changes overall that we recommend the state take into consideration that, long term we feel would benefit the community, but we understand we can't enact these things now. So I think they just need, like you said, the context and a little bit of a note. Sandra, I agree, it's got to be mentioned and you want it to be included so that they hear us, and that the more it's on more reform committee reports, the better. But I also think that framing it so that it's included, not as something we're trying to do ourselves right now. And the reform committee, the public, the state understands that we're not instituting something that we really can't institute right now. And we have to make sure that's noted clearly in the final.
I think, yeah, thank you for that. And we do mention somewhere, I can't remember what page, of the fact that, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, that funding, some of this can't happen without additional funding, but formalizing that into its own recommendation is, I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything we haven't covered yet? Any more comments from town board or questions?
Yeah, just so the board knows, we do have an opportunity if we want to discuss this again next Tuesday, but we have to vote on this plan on Thursday, the 18th.
That's obviously the next steps, Kathy. So the back end steps.
So next steps is Thursday, March 11th at 7 p.m. We'll have our community listening session. We'll have a Spanish translator, and it'll be via Zoom, LTV, actually broadcasts on YouTube channel. People will be able to call in and make comments. That'll begin at 7 p.m. We didn't put a cutoff time on it because
well, we did. We said 7 to 8.
And I don't know if we should keep it to 8. We had one comment last time, and if we put a close time, we'll be sitting on a blank screen for an hour.
Well, I think that the purpose we had talked about was, this is for folks that, can't tune in today because they're working and whatnot. And so it's the ability that, Sandra and Fred we can present the plan again in the evening with a Spanish translator.
Okay.
And we can then open up the phone lines for people to call in and ask questions, comment on the plan, share their experiences with East Hampton Town Police Department.
So planned for 7 to 8 then, and again, we'll have a Spanish translator on the line. Then we can reconvene as a committee to have final tweaks and mark a final plan. Then the town board could then discuss it on Tuesday at a work session, make any further changes or refinements, and have a resolution to adopt the plan on Thursday, the March 18th.
Now, I don't think we called for a meeting, Sandra and Fred, for this Monday of the committee. I don't know if we want to send out.
You, Sandra, and I discussed it. So
that it could be an option.
I think it's a good idea. I can reach out to everyone and ask, or say we're having another meeting with the final words included.
So we'll incorporate the changes that were discussed in what the town board wanted to do here. Send it back to the committee for their discussion, and the town board will be able to look at it again following work session on the 16th, and potentially, and then we'll have a final plan for a vote on the 18th.
And if we have time at Monday at the committee meeting, we could even do a little bit of a debrief on the survey. How can we do it better next time, as far as pushing it out into the community.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else before we move on?
This was a heavy lift, and I just want to thank, the committee and Sandra and Fred. Sandra, I know you drafted the plan and presented it so eloquently today, and I just want to, thank you on behalf of our community.
Both of you and all the committee members involved, a great deal of thanks and gratitude to you. And Sandra, I know you basically put together all the comments and helped draft this plan. You did a lot of work, and you're to be commended for your involvement in the results. So again, we thank you all. We will move forward. And,
thank you.
We're also going to keep them on the short list for the next time we have committees to appoint. I've already warned them.
It's great. It's terrific having highly functional people on to help us. We certainly appreciate that. So.
And we appreciate the opportunity.
It's been a good experience. So thank you all.
Yeah.
And
thanks, everyone.
Right,
so may we leave?
You can. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
That brings us up to our next agenda topic. But before we do that, Michael, do we have any callers on the line?
No, we do not. No, we do not. And nobody has called in.
Okay, so we have no callers yet today. We'll move on then to Chapter 141 Fire Prevention Code Amendments, and we have David Brown. And do we have John Jolnicki on the line too?
We do.
Oh, there he is. There's John. Good morning, gentlemen, or good afternoon now, I guess I should say.
Oh, yes, look at that.
So you want to walk us through these proposed changes and why we're discussing them?
Yeah, I'll start, and Buzzy, you can pick up wherever you want. Basically, right now in our code, we have a section in the fire code about permits. Which starts out with the lead-in that says there's no fee for permits except for a tent permit. The proposal here is to remove that reference, add a couple of permits, so we'll have to just kind of renumber and re-letter the existing code. There's not a lot of changes to it. We added 3 other new permits. One is the fire sprinkler systems, automatic fixed pipe fire extinguishing system, and installation of a cistern. And I'll let Buzzy explain the difference between those two if anybody wants to know, the fire suppression systems. And then I just added a provision at the end of that fees for permits, without specifying which type, would be set from time to time by resolution of the town board and paid at the time of an application for a permit. And that's the short explanation of the code changes. It's not a lot of changes. I just gave you that whole section when I emailed that around, just so you can see the context of where these changes are going.
Thank you, John. Buzzy, you want to give us for the uninitiated, differentiate the fire sprinkler systems from the automatic fixed pipe? And I think most of us know what a cistern is, but why that might be important to being listed in the fire code.
Okay. One of the reasons why I looked into this and is we always get inquiries from a lot of these companies asking us, how much do we write the check out for? Who do we write the check to? And is it, well, we don't charge anything. Is it, everybody charges for this now. We're the only ones, I think we're one of the last ones left on the island that aren't charging these fees. And I modeled it after, I looked at Southampton, Riverhead, local, nearest local municipalities to see what they were doing. And that's where I came up with a model and I came up with some of the fees. And what it is this is a little bit more to do these installations. It takes us a little bit more time. So it's adding more work when we get these, these extra plans for sprinkler systems, for alarm systems for these commercial buildings. Some of them can be as small as, a little small mom and pop place, or the Pods building up on Industrial Road, which is a huge system. It took, how many hours to, go through the plans, verifying, and then also to go out and do the inspections and the tests. And then sometimes when we find deficiencies, we have to, they have to revise the plans, or we have to go back out and do more inspections. And that, I think that adds to, taking us away from other inspections. So that's why we kind of come up with, I think, some of these fees. And it shows the application that I put in or proposing shows the different types of fire sprinkler systems for commercial, for residential. And then when we go back and we're looking at the fixed pipe systems, that's what we're talking about, restaurants, when we're doing the suppression systems and hoods and the vapor removal, that's restaurants. Because we get a lot of those during the season. And they add up, the amount of work of the reviews and then the inspections and the going out re-inspections. And part of it, again, is some of these re-inspections is to try and get these people to get it right the first time and not have to keep on going back and getting it right. Also, we look at on this same application, I put in the installation of LP systems. Right now, we do a permit for the LP systems on commercial. There's no fees, but it's so that we know what's going on, when it's going on. Tank removal is another big thing, is people sometimes try to abandon them in place, which is one code says you can and the other says you can't. And we don't like them abandoned in place because it's hard to, inert these things. And once they're buried and no longer any good, I think they should be taken out and gone. The cisterns, those are usually going to be on a site plan for a development. They're few and far between now. I haven't seen one installed in quite some time. But it was, again, it was one of the ideas on some of the other municipalities that it was in there for some of those reviews. Let's see, what else do we have? And again, the reinspection and compliance, that's one of the big things too. Some of the places up west just make you go through the whole system again. Start if you're adding something, or if you weren't compliant during the test, they're making you go through the step one all over again and resubmit your plans and some of these big fees. Not so much proposing that, but trying to, again, get these guys to get it right the first time on these. And most of it's all commercial systems. A few residential here and there, and we can make those, those aren't going to be as large of a system, so the fees are going to be less, because when we start looking at additional devices, the first 25 are free, and then additional after that. A lot of our residences, you're not going to get much more than that. So I don't think it's going to put much of an onus on residential, but more on the businesses for that one. We'll go to the other applications too. Like I
Leslie,
did,
could you just talk about the tents, when someone puts a tent permit in, what steps your department goes through?
Okay. What we have to do is we have to get the plans on each one, a site plan, a seating plan, a staking plan. The staking plan is figuring out how many stakes it's going to take to hold the tent down safely, or how much weight. And so it's a bunch of calculations that we have to configure. We go over, and we do site inspections. And again, if it's not correct, we're doing, possibly multiple inspections. We've been seeing these tents get larger and larger, and more expansive. Some of these places on Further Lane, huge tents. I mean, some of these parties, $3-4 million parties, and these tents are huge. And it takes us a lot of time to do the figures and the inspections too, getting out there and doing them. I proposed lowering the residential fee for the smaller tents down to 45. That was again taking some of the onus off of, I'm trying to have a little baby shower or something, or my kid's little birthday party. Do we want to hit the the local homeowners for that stuff? But looking more at the businesses and the commercial, because we're really inundated with those in the summer.
Thank you.
And again, I took these, stealing some of these ideas from our nearest neighbors and municipalities, and what the fees they're charging and ideas that they have.
So the game plan would be for us to, notice the code changes for public hearing. And then once, obviously the transcripts need to be posted and whatnot. And once we adopt the changes to chapter 141 fire prevention, then we could, set some, as Buzzy mentioned, set some fees for tents, particularly the larger ones, which, and I believe Southampton, I think Buzzy, you and I spoke about, it's like a sliding scale for the size of the tent, what the fee is, right. Which makes sense because, the larger the tent, the more work it is for the fire marshal's office.
And I think the last one I had was the operational annual permit. And those are for places that have hazardous materials. Because that's another, again, a little bit more of an added work for the department, as we have to track what they have. We have to submit it to the fire departments too, to make sure they have it and be aware of it as far as hazmat. I looked near municipalities, Southampton. I think I got a lot of the ideas from them and from Riverhead on this one. Looking at some of the fees, I think the town board you guys take a look at that to decide on what you think of the fees too, and the size of the fees. If I'm in line, you're thinking on it.
Yeah, I don't think we've circulated, Buzzy, what the fees would be yet. I think first
Right.
we need to get
The idea of it.
the amendments made and it taken to public hearing so that we can, adopt the code changes.
I think it's worth mentioning at this point with regard to tents and special events and residential properties versus commercial properties, we are still seeking guidance on the governor's restrictions on residential gatherings that are limited to 10. Buzzy talked about some of the events that we have in the summertime on very large properties with much larger numbers. Much of the catering that takes place here in our town is done actually outside at such outdoor events that are expansive. And the governor's lifting of some of the restrictions on catering are really more for applicable to western part of Suffolk and Nassau, where they have large indoor catering venues. We don't have too many of those here. And so we're seeking to get clarification and hopefully some accommodation to recognize these types of events as not being residential primarily in nature. So we'll keep the community informed as to the results of our inquiries and requests. Anything else for Buzzy at this point?
No, it all makes real sense. You're updating us, getting us in conformance with other municipalities, and there's a lot of time and effort that goes into this. And just as we had in our last discussion, time and effort when you're working at a municipal level means trying to find the funding sources for that. And again, another way of non-taxable revenue to pay for that, for the services we provide, is something we always have to look at.
So do you know when this will be scheduled for a public hearing? Can we do that this coming Thursday?
Yeah, I think we notice it on the 18th and then we hear it, I think it's April 1st. Is that the first Thursday of the month?
Yeah, April 1st would be the first.
Yeah,
one.
so we would hear it on April 1st.
Okay.
Is the plan.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks, Buzzy.
We'll move on now. Before we go to liaison reports, Michael, do we have any callers on the line?
No, we do not, and we haven't received any.
Okay. Well, we'll move on then.
Good day, everybody.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you, Buzzy. We'll move on to liaison reports. Kathy, do you have a report for us?
Yeah, I just want to, let folks know if you know any seniors out there that could benefit from our Human Services Department. They'd like 5 frozen meals delivered each week or need prescriptions picked up or whatnot. They should reach out to 631-329-6939. We've already talked about the meeting we have Thursday night at 7:00. Hopefully folks will tune in to hear, we'll have another discussion about the police reform and reinvention plan. Last month, we designated East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue as an emergency rescue and first aid squad. This is a critical designation for these active members, so they can now display those green lights on their vehicles when they're engaged in emergency operations. I had a conversation yesterday with Jim Arnold, the chief of Volunteer Ocean Rescue, and I sent him the link to easthamptontownvaccine.org, so all of the folks on the squad can get pre-registered for the vaccine. And the next up, we want to get the members their first responder ID cards. So I'm working with Kathleen Rood in Human Resources on that. We've Peter, you just touched on special events. I was going to mention that as well. And then lastly, on the website, it was pointed out to me by the police department's college intern that the town's website did not have a language translate button in plain sight. It does now. I worked with Nancy Serafin this morning in IT, and when you pull up the site now in the lower right-hand corner, there's the Google Translate button. And so now it'll be easier for residents and visitors to navigate the town website in their native language. And I appreciate IT's quick turnaround to make that happen.
Well, thanks to the intern for letting us know. Thanks to the intern discovering that, and thank you, Kathy, for making that happen with such little notice. And that's fantastic news. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a report from David.
Sure. Okay. I want to let everyone know the Recreation Department is moving forward with spring soccer, tennis, and golf registrations. All the protocols for these activities and programs have gone through, looked at state guidance, and also been referred to our our consulting epidemiologist, Bruce Polsky, and he sees that they're all the protocols we have in place are within state guidance. So, and would like to sign up for those, please go to the town's website. It's on directly on the town homepage, or contact the Recreation Department. We are also accepting in the Recreation Department applications for summer staff, summer part-time staff, lifeguards, recreational supervisors for our youth parks and skate parks. Please contact the Recreational Department if you have any questions at 631-324-4141. I know it's outside of recreation, but I also want to let you know that Little League of East Hampton Little League is actually having their registration for their upcoming spring season. Please go to their website and sign up if any of your children would like to play girls softball or boys baseball. I want to just the board discussion. Steve Lynch and also Craig Fick. I'm a pretty much a regular at the sanitation on the weekend, getting mulch or go to the dump with 4 kids. Unfortunately, meet my friends there. We've been discussing changes to the charges for yard waste. Okay, brush hauling. Typically, right now it's being charged by the ton, and they want to request the change it to be per yard. Typically, right now, the brush is at $115 a ton, but we want to change it to $35 a yard. And contaminated brush is $120 a ton. That would be changed to $40 a yard. This actually is in line with what other brush recyclers are doing within our jurisdiction or other jurisdictions, is charging by the yard. And it's actually still under the price of what the other recyclers are. Where it also makes sense is that within our DEC permit, we actually have a DEC permit that is that goes by yardage, not by tonnage. A lot of times our leaf pickups right now will be coming in, and the weight doesn't actually match the amount of yardage that is coming in, but it costs a lot of money to recycle all the mulching. So that is something that we're looking to implement, and wanted to see if the board member had any questions or concerns on that.
So David, is this for just commercial?
This is just for commercial, that's correct. Yeah.
So residents would still be free? I just want to get that out there so that, okay.
That is correct. Sorry about this, Sylvia, you're exactly right. The scale operators will have been and will continue to be trained in this new process, and they're ready to do so. And it might assist us with some of our operating budget there, knowing that we've had so many much more hundreds of yards of recyclables coming in. So, just any questions or concerns about moving forward in that way from any of the board members?
No, it's funny. I just saw online that while 2020 was the year of the home, 2021 is going to be the year of the yard.
Oh, okay.
Which for everybody updating their yard for their outdoor living.
Yeah, I don't know. I think 2020 was that to some degree too.
So David, could you send me those recommendations? Because I'll send those to the subcommittee for the energy sustainability, since we folded recycling in with that committee. So if you could get me some of that info, that would be helpful.
We'll send it right over, no problem.
Okay, great.
I've been in contact with Steve Lynch, and David's kept me in the loop, and I'm supportive of those changes. I just want to put that out there, and just you have a chance to look them over, get back to David, and we'll see about moving forward on them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let's see. I want to just a couple of our capital projects we were doing in Montauk. Just want to give you the update on those and some things that as we move forward from design to implementation. The Westlake Comfort Station. To be honest, I took a morning off on Sunday, and I went out to the Montauk Golf Course, and by myself I walked about 8 holes, and they put in a new halfway house, which is just their
Wait,
pretty.
wait, I'm sorry, David. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You did what on Sunday morning? You went out and walked 9 holes of golf course after standing at the pod till after midnight calling to make sure the last doses were administered.
Got to get your legs loose. You know?
I couldn't get out of the bed. It's good to be young. Good for you, man. Sorry about that.
No worries. Well, we got there, and I got to like the 7th hole, and they have a newer / comfort station that's there, and they actually have solar panels on top, which got me thinking: can we put solar panels on to run the load that we would need at the new comfort station? And the information came in this morning, yes.
Sure.
And it wouldn't void any of the warranties for the comfort station as far as the roofing. So Lauren and Sabero and our engineer are going to be looking into it. There might be a little bit more of an increase in that cost, and we're going to try to figure that out right now. I'll get back to you. But again, it's another way that the town is, as we install upgraded infrastructure, we can always look to make sure we meet our energy efficiency goals. So just want to let the board know about that. And also Montauk Skate Park, the Montauk Skate Park Coalition is meeting actually with the lead designer of Pivot Customs, Tito Parata, this weekend. So that project's continuing to move forward, and they're going to be bringing down a lot of the users, the kids, the girls, the boys down there to tell him what they would like to see, and they'll start moving that forward to design. Nature Preserve Committee is going to meet this week, but I just want to let you know that we're continuing to move forward with a potential design for that grant application that I discussed for our colonial cemeteries. It would be a multiple property documentation form for the historical burial grounds, cemeteries, and grave sites in East Hampton. Again, once we identify these, it will allow these sacred sites to be eligible to go into the National Register of Historical Places. Please look forward to an email that I'll be sending out about the match that would be needed for this. It's a minor amount, but I think we could end up to a lot larger funding sources. And next week, I requested to see if we could put on, Peter, let me know if we can do this, discussions for the management plan of the fresh pond grasslands that was sent over. There's time sensitivity to that based on the code that we have to have a discussion. And I think it works best next week if we have
David, just send the request to Ann in reply to her, weekly call for.
Sounds good.
Yeah, just let her know.
Yep. In buildings and grounds, and I know, Peter, you're probably going to mention this later. I could thank the whole entire buildings and grounds group, but I really want to thank Richard Webb right now. Richard scared me straight at about 5:15 in the morning on Friday morning when I was at the CDCH building, or the Building for Humanity. He walked in. I wasn't expecting anyone, but he was there at 5:15, and he was there 1 in the morning when we all got ready to leave. So great dedication to Richard to be there and assist in any role possible. Unsung sometimes, but I want to make sure I just let him know that the board, myself personally, thanks him for his time and dedication.
Yeah, appreciate that, David, and I'll be speaking more about all that in my liaison report.
Good. In aquaculture, I'm going to let everyone know it is the growing season for aquaculture. We're all excited about that. They're doing multiple spawns and larvae growing, and they're also starting to bring the brood stock up, which is what they need for feeding aquaculture, feeding the clams and the shellfish as they grow. John Barley Dunn is actually accepting applications for the Community Oyster Program. Please contact him, let him know that. We're also looking at potential ways in which we can establish grow-out sites for kelp right now. And kelp is shown to decrease nitrogen loading in critical body water bodies. And it's an interesting way that when you grow kelp, it's grown actually in the wintertime. So it doesn't interfere with traditional uses during the summertime as boating, and can be done small ways. And then also the kelp then in the springtime can go into the sanitation for their composting and increase the nutrient loading for the compost that again goes and is resold then too. So we're looking. John Dunn is working on that and potentially looking for grant funding for that. And I'll have some more information as we move that forward. But it's very interesting actually about how sugar kelp has been discussed through the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council, and maybe potentially we might be able to do a small thing there. it's like 2 or 3 strings of it just to see if it grows, and then we can test the waters to see if it does decrease nitrogen loading in certain areas. And it's
There
continuously.
was a Cornell Extension pilot project, a very small scale one at the head of near Pussy's Pond and Nakabonic Creek, measuring nitrogen uptake. And, I think that would be terrific to look at ways to increase nitrogen uptake and also provide additional, habitat in the absence of eelgrass particularly.
Yeah, I agree. To look forward to that, and lastly, just came across my desk earlier is from the DEC. They have their reach outs, and I know I've discussed this in the past. It's part of aquaculture. And it was called the Billion Oyster Project, and the Billion Oyster Project was done in New York City over the last recent years. Discuss how they used they restored oyster reefs in New York Harbor through public education, collaboration with New York committees to decrease nitrogen loading, but also to protect the city from storm damage, because they end up being a little bit of a living shoreline. And there's going to be a very neat webinar. It's called Join the Women's Science webinar, which is for March 10th. The webinar will be Wednesday, March 10th, 3 to 4 p.m. You can register at the state DEC's website. There will be discussion from Anne Frioli, Director of Education of the Billion Oyster Project. I found it enlightening, and I look forward to joining on to this. And anyone else who would like to watch Women in Science, please join on and watch this on Wednesday, March 10th, because it combines the brilliance of this lady, and then also a little bit of the nexus to our waterways out east. With that, that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Sylvia, you have a report for us?
I do. So the Waynescott CAC met on Saturday, and as usual, their meetings were from 9 to about 12:15, I think is when we ended. There were over 60 participants on the Zoom call. The discussion on the Waynescott Hamlet implementation plan was a long discussion, and we talked about the planning department that's preparing a timeline concerning implementation, and that I had asked the town board if a consultant could be hired to coordinate the issues and to make it more efficient through the implementation plan. Stated that the process is already there are some things in process at the planning department, which is currently working on the rezoning of the western portion of the hamlet, which would have a limited business overlay put over that section of the hamlet, as discussed in the hamlet plan. So that's already being worked on, and we'll have a presentation soon, I hope, at the town board work session. The planning department believes that the most challenging issues in the hamlet are going to be about traffic and developing the hamlet business overlay district, permits, special permits, what would be included in those special permits, and design needs for that hamlet, which would include, the Waynescott pit as well. And one of the things that the members, several members would like to see is that the speed limit on Montauk Highway be addressed sooner rather than later, and have it lowered to 30 miles per hour. So that's something that I'll relay to the planning department as well. A couple of folks weren't really familiar with the entire hamlet study process that we did for 4 years. So there was a kind of a long discussion and a recap of how that process went through. And there was also some concern about the pit redevelopment, and that to consider a larger buffer for the houses that are on the side of the pit on Hedges Lane, where there is a residential community. There was, from the Georgica, Friends of Georgica, there wanted to tell people that there is some heavy equipment on Beach Lane for dredging of Georgica Pond that's going on right now. They also reported that there will be activity at the former restaurant site as the building is being demoed over the next few weeks. That's the site that was purchased through the Peconic Land Trust and was part of the original Hamlet study to have that as to go back to nature. So that one's being implemented. The airport issues came up. Some members seemed unaware that the DEC in the town has worked on the airport for remediation of contamination at the site. So hopefully we will get some information to the members of the CAC about work that's being done and how that is progressing. Several members do not believe that AMAC represents the Waynescott citizens, and that when suggestions for an agenda item are presented to AMAC, they kind of dismiss it, and they would like a citizens committee enacted sooner rather than later. There was a short discussion really, on the Waynescott trees that are on Main Street. And Hillary Osborne Malecki, who's president of the Sewing Society, had sent an email to the members that said the trees were planted on Main Street about 1920, so they're now over 100 years old, by either the Sewing Society or the disbanded Waynescott Village Improvement Society. The trees have been declining in health. As we said, they're over 100 years old. Large limbs have fallen and have been a danger to pedestrians and to motorists. They have been documented that some of the trunks have split, and that documentation was done by the Highway Department. So I want to thank the Highway Department for documenting those with photographs so that we know which trees were diseased or were failing in health. And so 6 or 7 of the trees have been taken down. And all of those trees were obviously in the town's right of way. And it's taken over the past couple of years. It wasn't done all at one time. Replacing those trees is desired by the committee, but the mechanism to plant and water and nourish the trees needs some careful consideration, because a lot of these trees are under the power lines that are existing already there. So I was hoping that a project like this, the replacement of the trees, as they age out of the process, could be part of the Waynescott Benefit Fund from the South Fork Wind Farm. Mm-hmm. So this might be a really good use of that money.
Sylvia, can I also just jump in, as I think that's a great use of the money. A community member brought up at the meeting that he had foiled the town to see if the town had an arborist on staff. And he had said that, an arborist to review the health of the trees, and that the town doesn't have an arborist. And I'm wondering if it was, in the way that he phrased it, while we don't have an arborist on staff, we consult with arborists when we need to. We just recently did that at the Springs Library. So I just think that there may have just been maybe a literal response to his FOIL request, and that's why he was confused, because he may have gotten the impression that we don't work with arborists, when in fact we do. We just don't have a town employee that's an arborist.
We do not have a town employee, but I do want to say that Kevin Cobb is the one that goes out and takes pictures before any of these trees are taken down. He takes photographs, and I have photographs that were foiled from the Highway Department that show the trunks have split, that show where limbs are dead on trees that are particularly under the wires, under the power lines or the lines that are there, or they're half dead trees. Half of the tree is dead, and then the other half has leaves still on it. But these are all, ready to come down in a storm. When they then take the trees down, they show how the trees are eaten out on the inside, how they're starting to fail. So we have a lot of those photographs, particularly in that Waynescott area. I don't know. My understanding is that no arborist looked at those particular trees because it was so evident that these trees were failing, especially when you start seeing these split trunks and things like that. So, and Kevin has been doing this for, I think, 23 years. So I can appreciate his knowledge, although not a trained arborist, he certainly has seen his fair share of diseased trees and those that need to be taken down for safety's sake.
So was there interest in having an arborist do a review of the trees that are there to determine whether they should be taken down or not and replaced?
At this time, they didn't say that, but that might be a really good idea to.
Something you could bring up to them and just ask if they want to have that happen. And you mentioned that these trees are also underneath of existing power lines. This
Yes.
is primarily on Main Street, right?
Yes, this was
And
all a
So
discussion.
I think a discussion as to whether or not, it's been talked about for multiple years now, the burying of those power lines moving forward. And if the community wants that as a project as well, that should, go under discussion perhaps. And maybe both of them together should be discussed, because one can overlap with the other.
Thank you. That's great. The Arts Council also met last night, and they had their creative networking night on March the 4th. They had over 82 people on that Zoom call, which is the most that they've ever had at an event. This is the first one that they've actually done that was a Zoom. They were very pleased with how many people attended. There was a lot of positive comment. It was videoed, and I hope it will be replayed again on LTV. So, and I think that gives them hope and impetus, actually, just to plan another CNN night during this time when everybody's Zooming, and it seems easy to jump online to be seeing other artists and what they're doing and working on and supporting our artists. They've also decided to do Art Apart again. They did it, if you recall, early summer. They're going to use the same weekend, which would be June the 19th, and a rain date June the 20th. And they're starting to arrange that. If you recall, they had a map. It was all done on a website so that there was a map where people could follow and go to and drive by. It's a drive-by art show. And it was very successful last year. So they are excited about doing it again this year. The Arts Council, a couple of members are working on Brooks Parks and hopefully finding some way to restore before it falls down all by itself. And they're going to try to work with an outside organization to see if they can find a way.
So we did have a meeting, the town property management committee chair, myself, and some other folks with those people and others, again, trying to reinvigorate and a robust approach to trying to find a way forward to preserve Brooks Park. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm glad that the Arts Council members were taking this up, and there seems to be now some renewed interest, and maybe a path forward. We're working with them to give them all of the documentation of the various steps that had taken place over a multitude of years and discussions, license agreements, the site plan, the access issues with regard to once it becomes a place of public assembly, has to meet certain criteria as to fire access under state code and whatnot. So we're going to make all of that available to them, and with the understanding that certain milestones have to be met going forward. And they seemed quite enthusiastic, and so I appreciate the Arts Council and you for helping to initiate that and actually get this going again after a year or more of nothing happening.
Yeah, and Peter, I want to thank you too for being at that meeting with the property management folks and the Arts Council members, because I do think there was a lot of good feeling that came out of that meeting, and that they are enthusiastic about working with property management and enthusiastic with that there is a way forward. So thank you for that. The Anti-Bias Task Force, although we meet tomorrow night, They have decided that and worked with the East Hampton Star. The Star is going to, at their cost, put in as an insert the bumper stickers. So we are going to put in. Yeah. So we've been trying to get them out there, but because of COVID, we couldn't. We think that they are a good way to, talk about the unity in our community. So those bumper stickers, we're printing another 6,600 for inserts into the East Hampton Star, and I will let you know which edition that will be, so that you can look for your bumper sticker. Make sure, I know a lot of you already have them, but out there in the community, I hope everyone puts them on, recognize ourselves as a united community, and a locally united community. So I think this will maybe designate that for everyone.
That's terrific, Sylvia. Good job on that. That's terrific. And thanks to the Star for being willing to do
the Star is a good partner in this. So I want a big shout out to the Star for doing this.
That's great.
The East Hampton Energy Sustainability Committee is doing a webinar on March the 18th. This is a webinar about solar. Any questions that you have, we'll put all the information up on the town website. There's a poster. I'll make sure that town board members get a poster and can send out to their committees. I think some of that's already happened. So anyway, just reminding people, March the 18th, there will be a solar webinar, can hopefully answer all your questions about doing solar here in East Hampton. And that is my report.
Thank you, Sylvia. Jeff, do you have a report for us?
Yeah, I do. I want to tell everybody that there's going to be a road cleanup on Springs Fireplace Road this coming Saturday. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it is from East Hampton, Sag Harbor CAC, beginning at the Foster House and working our way up in the northeast. It's something they do regularly, and it's a bit of a spring cleaning, and I gather there'll be supplies there for anybody who wants to join in.
Is that part of the Suffolk County Adopt a Road?
I don't, this is something that the CAC is doing on their own. I don't know.
So that's in conjunction with the Suffolk County Adopt a Road.
Yeah, because a little bit north of that is where John Potter and Bob Pine and Chris Ganich also adopted a road in our they tag teamed.
This Saturday, and maybe there'll be, maybe we can see some change there as we move on and the plans firm up for Springs Fireplace Road. I wanted to talk about Brooks Park, particularly the somewhat negative comment you made, Peter, about nothing getting done over the past year. And I'd certainly like to be a part of this because I have been working on Brooks Park. As you know, I've talked about this. I've and been in a discussion with the National Trust on preserving it. I've talked to the Gardner Foundation about it. I have some. So I see you shaking your head, no, Peter. But
no, I know you did that quite some time ago. But go ahead.
Well, I've also got some.
Tell us what you've done.
Let me, if I can, just without interruption, make the report that you can do whatever you feel you have to do. Okay. I'm glad. I was glad to see the Arts Council getting energized about it. I think this is a landmark in the town, and the National Trust is very concerned about its preservation. It is eligible to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And I've also done sort of the legal research in the background about how to do a joint private-public partnership, which is a way to access some funding that we could not ordinarily get involved with. I'd talked to the head of the Suffolk County Parks Department about it, and recently have made some progress in terms of personnel that can help us. So I'm offering that because I don't think the folks out that are watching this know what's been going on behind the scenes, but I certainly want to be included with the Arts Council. I have some suggestions to share with folks that can actually help us get moving on the project.
So just feel free to share with your fellow board members anything that you've done too. That would be helpful.
We've talked about this in exec session, where it really shouldn't have been discussed, Peter, at your insistence. And we've had lengthy
Jeff, Matt,
discussions.
you've really stepped over a line, and I want to make it clear that anything we discussed in the exec session was absolutely appropriate and had to do with a licensee and situations surrounding the licensee. So let's leave it at that, okay?
I just mentioned, all I mentioned was the subject. You know, you jump in and say we haven't discussed it. It's true that we have discussed it in the exec session. That's perfectly proper to say.
That has nothing to do exactly with what we're talking about.
Well, what I'm talking about is other work that I've done.
Yeah, and again,
the project to keep it alive and to
share that with fellow board members, we'd be very happy.
And the board members have been made apprised of it, Peter. And over your opposition and your strong desire to tear those buildings down.
Please, Jeff, let's be honest, okay?
Yeah, let's be honest. Right.
The record does
That's
not
correct.
reflect. The record simply does not reflect anything you've said.
Oh, really? Well, your comments reflect what I've said.
Can we continue on with the report, Jeff, please?
Yeah, I was also at the Wayne Scott CAC meeting, listening in, and I echo what Sylvia said, that the Wayne Scott Committee wants to set up a subcommittee of their own on the airport, which has been sort of inactive. They are very eager to begin a revisioning process, and to the extent that we're able to discuss it, I explained to them that, you know, we're dealing with some preliminary legal issues that have to be resolved that I can't discuss, and that has caused, you know, some delay in getting started. So I support the idea that they would form a subcommittee and start communicating with us. Happy to get any comments that they have in. And as you know, we're going to continue to discuss those legal issues and try to resolve them as quickly as we can. We did make it clear that the date on which the grant assurances expire is not a hard and fast, you know, stop or go date. But people are eager to start talking about the airport. So I just wanted to say again that the sooner we can do that, the better it is. I wanted to bring up one issue that wasn't discussed, that was discussed, that was a concern to them, and that is an application for an extraordinarily large house in Wayne Scott. There's a house that's currently under review that is on a 4-acre parcel that's going to be 17,000 square feet. That's pretty big even by East Hampton standards. I was checking the law after the meeting and saw that we define superstores as, you know, anything that's 10,000 square feet or over. So this is, you know, 1.5 or more times large than a superstore. And it suggested to me that, you know, not aiming at this application, but just in general, I'm going to try to get some comparisons on house size limitations. I think we really have to re-examine that. You know, just doing some calculations, it's clear that we can get these enormous castles being built, and they're, you know, even with, you know, modern technology that's as green as possible, a 17,000 square foot house is going to be an energy hog, much more so than a smaller house. And I think it's an issue of concern, and it's something that they raised out of concern about its impact on Wayne Scott. So I just wanted to put that out there and say that it might bear some examination.
I think they also raised the fact that it's the applications that are before the ARB are not easily accessible, whereas, you know, the planning board and ZBA, you can get the applications, but it's hard to follow along on the ARB meetings.
They were, yes, and they were particularly referring to a meeting where there was a lot of technical problems with, you know, putting the documents up in a Zoom meeting so that they were visible, and that has been a problem. And we've had a meeting with the ARB and are working on some solutions there. And that's really all I have on liaison work. But I did want to mention, because I think it's significant, that we had the country had a significant anniversary on Sunday. This last Sunday was the 56th anniversary of what's become known as Bloody Sunday. It was that march led by John Lewis as a very young man across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, marching from Montgomery, I think, to Selma. And it was the event that really triggered the opening of public consciousness about the civil rights movement. And as you know, as you probably remember, John Lewis was badly beaten. It became a national story. And within 5 months, Lyndon Johnson convened a joint session of Congress and through his skills as a legislator, got through the Voting Rights Act. And, you know, it seems somewhat appropriate to remember it today, even a couple of days later, because it really does relate to the police revisioning work that we're talking about, because all this talk about implicit racism, implicit bias, and racial profiling, it is an example of sort of another stage that we're going through to deal with the terrible persistence of racism in the country, and our continuing efforts to eradicate it and, you know, make the country a better country for everybody who lives here. And I noticed in my email, chain the other day that we got a note from a relative, a descendant of Lee A. Hayes, who was one of the Tuskegee airmen during the Second World War. And I guess it was his grandniece was asking for some recognition for his heroism and his work in fighting not only racism in the country, but fighting for the country. And I thought that that was a good suggestion too. Hopefully our work on the police committee and our work on ourselves as a country is going to lead us into a new era of tolerance. And I just going to reach out to the niece of Lee Hayes. He was another notable American that lived in those communities in Sag Harbor that have hosted so many famous politicians, lawyers, artists, you name it, the pantheon of American heroes over there. So I wanted to say a word about Bloody Sunday because it's still with us, and the cases now in front of the Supreme Court are possibly going to undermine that stellar work of legislation, and we just have to keep our fingers crossed and hope that we can continue to progress on these issues. That's all I have for today.
Can I just add one thing about the airport? So Jeff, I think what I heard is that the airport, it wasn't that the Waynescott CAC wanted a subcommittee to look at the airport. They would like there were people that were not on the Waynescott CAC that were asking for a citizens committee to be put together so that an envisioning of the airport, whichever way it goes, can be considered. So it wasn't just the CAC. There are only really 10 members of the CAC. So this was really from outside of those members, the actual membership, but certainly a discussion at the WCAC meeting. So
I agree with that. I agree with that. There were two separate issues.
Yeah.
The CAC wanted to reinvigorate their airport committee, which is fine. And yes, I agree with you. They do want a citizens committee that participates in the revisioning process.
Right. And
which comes back to the issue of like
they didn't feel AMAC was helping them out and didn't consider some of the things that they would like to discuss. They didn't put them on an agenda for AMAC, and so they're getting a little frustrated.
Well, AMAC's a management committee. It's not really a revisioning committee, so I see a difference there. But you're correct. I agree with you that they would like a citizens committee, and I think it's a good idea. I said then, and I'll say now, I'm not sure a citizens committee that has diversity as to how they feel about airport use or other use is going to reach a consensus, but it's certainly a good sounding board, I think, for us going forward. So, but yeah, we have to.
I think we need to hear that. We need to, yeah. Okay.
We have to move the process. And right. As I know, we have some legal issues to deal with.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing.
And Jeff, the only thing about Mr. Hayes, I think it'd be great if you maybe reached out to the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC, knowing that some of the things in the letter there would involve that CAC also. Be great to hear from them, their thoughts on it then too. It was
Yeah.
a very
Oh,
intriguing
that's a
letter.
good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea. I was, I was going to say I was surprised to get the letter, but the more you know about the communities, the Sands communities, the more amazing it is who has lived there, vacationed there, has relatives there. I mean, it is really a group of, very prominent Americans in all walks, all professions, government, law, entertainment, arts. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing who has a connection to that community. And the Tuskegee Airmen are heroes under the most trying circumstances when they were fully exposed to racism even while in the military, and getting a chance to fly heroically and succeed remains a great accomplishment for all Americans to know about. So I will reach out on that, David.
And Jeff, I appreciate your comments about blood.
I have to mute momentarily. I have dogs barking.
I before you run, I just wanted to thank you for your comments on Bloody Sunday and about Lee Hayes. Again, these are examples of where we've been and where we're going. And I think, Lee Hayes and Tuskegee Airmen particularly proved to all that, in fact, we really are all alike, and we need to have equality and be recognized that anyone can achieve great things and that there shouldn't be distinctions and separations made. And landmark legislation, Voting Rights Act, voting rights are integral to our democracy surviving. I know that there are efforts to try and limit voter access even now in response to the last election. And, that's something that we should all take notice of. Everybody has the right to vote who's registered to vote, and everybody who's has a right to vote should be able to register to vote. So I do appreciate those comments and bringing that up. And please take care of your dog.
She's okay.
Okay now? Okay now? Okay.
Everything's okay.
Okay, good. Anything else to report, Jeff?
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, as many of you may know, I know that certainly the town board's aware, but the town has hosted and actually administered, I think, close to 2,000 doses of vaccine to East End, and particularly East Hampton residents in the last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, due to our standalone vaccine portal website. We were able to register now, I think, over 4,300 town residents for vaccine. We were able to use those registrations to direct citizens to be vaccinated. We got notice, very short notice, that there was going to be a pod sponsored by Stony Brook Medicine at the Greek Orthodox Church on Thursday. My office made dozens and dozens and dozens of phone calls and sent out emails to get folks from East Hampton appointments and to show up there. That was very successful. We also got confirmation at 3 o'clock on Thursday that in fact the Stony Brook Medicine had been confirmed for 1,200 doses to be delivered and administered at our standalone vaccination site at the former CDCH building. That ran from, I believe, 7 in the morning till, David, what time did we close up there? Was it 1 a.m.?
We got home around 2 in the morning.
Yeah, we got home around 2 in the morning. They not only did they do 65 and over, which was the brunt of the supply, but they also had additional vaccine that they could in fact administer for 1A category and some other folks, comorbidities and whatnot. That was very successful. I want to thank all the hospital staff, Robert Ross and Robert Challenger for their help and assistance in making that a huge success. And then that was followed on Saturday, and the town itself administered with volunteer help 680 additional doses of vaccine, all Pfizer vaccine, to town residents. It was a really joyous and upbeat and a smoothly run operation by all accounts. People were extremely grateful to be having access to vaccine here locally. And there's so many people to thank and so much gratitude for folks. And, David mentioned earlier, Richard Webb from our Buildings and Grounds Department, who just put in huge hours. That whole department really had an epic performance in preparing the building to get it to the point where we could offer vaccine, and then being around to make sure that everything ran smoothly, whether it was setting up the lights outdoors once it started getting dark, helping with traffic control, making sure all the sanitizing of surfaces, we had access to all the equipment we need, whatnot, set up, breakdown, wee hours of the morning, wee hours of the night to make that happen. We had dozens of resident volunteers who helped make it run smoothly. We had vaccinators, we had local doctors, we had pharmacists, we had all sorts of folks, nurses, administering vaccine, helping people register, moving them through the process. Again, very grateful. At this point, we hope to continue to get supplies of vaccine. We still have a number of teachers in the community and have started reaching out to the local school districts. I know East Hampton has probably about 70 teachers yet unvaccinated. And many of the schools are planning to have in-classroom teaching begin again. I've asked the state directly if they can send us another allotment that we can administer to 1B essential workers, which would include teachers within our local school districts and their staff. We need to get them vaccinated. We also are approaching, the season, and restrictions are being lifted on percentage of indoor dining. We need to get our restaurant workers, hotel workers, the rest of the grocery store clerks.
And food pantry.
And food pantry. So, they've been added to 1B. We need to get all those folks vaccinated as soon as possible. Again, I don't think the county's going to have an allotment for us for this weekend. I'm still hoping that will change. All this happens with only a couple days' notice to turn the pot around and get that rolling. But it's run very smooth so far. It's really gratifying to see so many of our town residents, and anybody who spent any time there would have seen dozens of people they knew that they literally haven't seen in a year. It was just really something to behold. We hope to continue to repeat it multiple times going forward. And the only thing really that we're waiting on at this point are allotments of vaccine. We have a dedicated, again, vaccination website portal, and the address is ehtownvaccine.org. We've put that out. Social media platforms, LTV ran a crawler. Again, we have over 4,300 registrants so far, and we're able to do a good number of those who've already registered, and encouraging everyone to continue to do that. If you know someone who doesn't have access to a computer or website, you can walk them through that. If you have access, and help register them. And, if you have a friend or neighbor who's elderly, has comorbidity, is eligible in any category, and even if you're not eligible, the eligibility groups will continue to expand. Go ahead and get on the site and register them, reach out to them, and then, you'll be putting your email for the response, and you can help them by once you get that email response to schedule, you can contact them, work that out. So this has really been a community effort, and it will continue to be going forward. Again, I thank everyone who's been involved, and that's where we stand with vaccinations. The infection rate is still hovering around the 4+% for Suffolk County. Vaccines is helping, but people need to not let their guard down. There are still cases in town being diagnosed. We do have, again, additional testing location now in Montauk, and that is by the Fort Pond boat ramp, as well as the site behind Town Hall. Also, there are local, I know our local doctor, George Dempsey, also offers testing to the general public through his office. So if you have any concerns about having been exposed, need to get tested, those are some of your options. There, I will say also on the web portal that we have, ehtownvaccine.org, there is a list of other vaccination sites where you may be able to also schedule appointments. So just please visit the site and share it with others. We have, I've mentioned before that the FIMP presentation that we got from Army Corps of Engineers had moved us to the third contract position rather than first position. And I've been talking with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, as well as State Senator Anthony Palumbo, our legislator, County Legislator Bridget Fleming, Supervisor Schneiderman. I'll be reaching out to County Executive Steve Ballone as well, and Congressman Lee Zeldin in Schumer's office to make sure that all the electeds that represent us are aware of our situation and our need to make sure that we're back in first position as we were promised. The Army Corps assured us that this would be the case when we signed on many years ago to the Emergency Stabilization Project, saying that FIMP would come to us first. And not only did they underestimate the costs of maintaining the project in the interim, the number of years has slipped, and now they're saying that we'll be in contract 3. This is completely unacceptable. We are going to continue to push to be reinstated as the first project as part of FIMP, or to get federal funding to cover the costs of restoring the beach until FIMP project is actually implemented. We really shouldn't be expected to bear those costs. Neither the town nor the county should be on the hook for that. And I've already discussed Brooks Park. So I want to mention that last night we had the Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. There was a discussion about postal delivery. Again, that's been an ongoing discussion and outreach to the community of the hamlet to see whether or not people support the idea of home delivery rather than just going to post office. The Postal Service has renewed the contract, the lease for that property, so they do intend to be staying there. But the committee has been working on putting together a postcard, which they intend to circulate within Amagansett to get a response. So it's a small survey postcard. So that's ongoing. There was a presentation from a subcommittee member, Michael Jordan, about the Nature Preserve Committee's discussion of the 555 management plan, and specifically highlighted the discussion that there was some interest in possibly having some community gardening or farming on some portion of the property. There was discussion of the current soil analysis of various parts of the property. And generally, the property has very poor soil conditions, having been stripped of most of the topsoil decades ago. And that's something that could be amended through the bringing in of compost and other materials to restore soils and with the aid of subsoiling or potentially with raised beds for community gardens. So that was discussed. There was a brief discussion of special events on the property, mentioning that the current discussion was surrounding 8 days worth of special events per year, and that would include setup and breakdown. Any portion of use of the property counts as a day. So that again is still in discussion and working on a draft plan, which once completed will be submitted to the town board for discussion and the scheduling of a public hearing. And that's pretty much what I have. So, Michael, do we have any callers on the line?
No, we do not, and we haven't received any.
Okay, let's move on to resolutions. Kathy, do you have resolution?
Sure, I do. Resolution 2021-354 is a special warrant, special warrant 2020-933 in the amount of $316,703.50.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
2021-355 is the, it's for adult daycare staff to receive 6 hours of personal care skills training at a financial impact of $300 per the New York State Office for the Aging and Suffolk County Office for the Aging mandates.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
I'd like to offer resolution 2021-356. This is the dockage fees for 2021. Resolved that the dockage fees for town dock at 3 Mile Harbor will be $125 a linear foot. Energy fees will be $90 per slip minimum, plus any amount for usage over the above said minimum.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
2021-357 is the appoint lifeguard to pre-season training for 2021. Vanessa Edwards, an hourly rate of $17.99, retroactive to March 1st, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
Resolution 358 is to accept undertaking and security for Flex Development. The principal is Flex Development. Project name is Kinsella 2 Minor Subdivision. And it is a bond with Atlantic Specialty Insurance Company for $85,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. I have resolution 359, appoint seasonal snow removal driver in the highway department. That's at a rate of $25 an hour, and that is John Hurtado. And that will be effective retroactive to February 18th, 2021. And hopefully, nothing against John, but hopefully we won't need his service for this year until maybe the fall.
You read my mind.
Do I have a second then?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 360 is resolution of human services to amend resolution 2020-1134. Resolve 2020-34 is to amend, reflect, clarify Ed Schnell's. I did say human service. I meant to say human resources. I'm sorry. Resolution's human resources, and this is to amend resolution 2020-1134 to reflect and clarify Ed Schnell's appointment to the title of Network Communications Specialist effective December 1, 2020, in accordance with the rules, policies, procedures set forth Suffolk County Department of Civil Service, and resolve that resolution 1134 is to accept and amend here in all other respects are reaffirmed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 361 is 2020 budget modification for Fort Hill Cemetery, and that is moving $750 from repairs to $750 in water.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. 362, budget modification civil defense. And that is moving $5,000 from contingent other in the amount of $5,000 to subcontractor costs in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. 2021. 363 is to retain Sokoloff Stern LLP, United Paving Corp. Versus Grimes et al. And this is resolved that the council should not, said council shall be appointed not an amount not to exceed $10,000 for the services bond claim vouchers.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Resolution 2021-364 is to authorize town supervisor to enter into a stipulation with the CSEA. And it really should say resolve the town supervisor is authorized to enter into stipulation with the CSEA, provide 4 hours of paid leave, 2 paid leaves if required by the type of vaccine to receive a COVID vaccination in the year 2021. This paid leave is limited to one-time basis in 2021, retroactive to January 1st, 2021. It is not a practice or precedent for future years or other vaccinations.
Second is amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried. We have items to discuss in exec session today.
We do. I move to enter into an exec session to discuss the acquisition of real property, to discuss the hiring of personnel to fill a vacancy in the code enforcement office, and to receive advice from counsel.
Second.
Second.
Do you want to have a time attached to this when we go back into session?
I know that we have the personnel issue discussed at 3, I believe.
Mhm.
We're supposed to have attorneys at 2. I can maybe try to adjust that. I don't know what to do.
Well, we can go straight in if you like. I don't know. Whatever the board's pleasure.
I need a quick break. Sorry.
So we
Okay.
say 2:30.
Low blood sugar.
Same.
We'll take 30, Jeff, if you can make a phone call to see if we
Okay.
Well,
30.
can we do what we need to do with them in 30 minutes?
Not, we can start with acquisition.
Or would they be better at 3:30? I'm just,
You know what? I'll try to bump them to 3:30. You want to call it at 2? But I'll send an email.
We'll reconvene at 2:30. I'll send the link now.
All right, thanks.
Do you have a second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody. Be well, stay safe.